Great. Hello to those who I know in the audience, who's quite a few. My name's Debbie Matthews, as Tim said. I work currently for an organisation called Manor and Castle Development Trust. That's our watchword, making the difference, supporting community action. I just want to give you a little bit of background about my involvement with the Trust, and then I want to talk about our journey, if you like. And I've been on that journey now for 23 years, which is when we first started. When I first started the journey, I actually used to work for Sheffield Health Authority, and I was part of the health promotion department, working for Healthy Cities. There is constantly a health theme through this conversation. So just a little bit of background. The area that I work in is now called Manor Castle. It used to be two wards, Manor Ward and Castle Ward. Manor Ward was predominantly a white working class council estate, and it was one of the biggest in Europe. And if you've got an aerial photo and you look down on it, it is lots of concentric circles of housing all surrounding each other, and it was absolutely enormous. Roy Hattersley wrote an article for The Guardian, and the editorial labelled it as the worst estate in Britain, which was a bit unfair on Roy, because that's not quite what he was saying. What he was saying was that the impact of the recession had resulted in the decline of the Manor Estate, because the Manor Estate was built originally to service the engineering and the steel industries, and when they collapsed in Sheffield, the Manor was disproportionately affected, and very quickly. So the response to that label was that the community were really angry, and there was a lot of there were meetings between the council, the community, and some private sector organisations, which led to an application for Single Regeneration Budget 3, which was very successful, and it levered in just over 16 million over 7 years to address the issues that were actually identified by the local community. Not by the council, not by the NHS, but by the people who lived in that community themselves. And it was built on a history of social action. So 30 years before, we've had 30 years of that. And the first project was one called the Manor Employment Project, where some local people who've been made redundant from industry basically illegally occupied an old disused council site, and they started to set up their businesses, so it was a bit of an informal economy. And instead of evicting them, the council put some money in and provided some development worker support to help them build their businesses, and then they moved them out into Manor Development Company, which was built specifically for start-up businesses literally round the corner. So there's been a history of people taking control of their own lives, basically. So in 1996, we'd seen the population of the area decline. The housing on the Manor Estate was really poor. It was called boot houses. They were falling to bits. It would have cost more to refurbish those houses than demolish them and rebuild. So there was a process of demolishing houses, which is part of why the population declined. Stabilised around about 1991. It's around 16,000 people. But some of the statistics, we were the worst, most disadvantaged ward in Sheffield at that time. Unemployment was 26%, 41% on income support. Only 16% of the pupils in the local schools managed to gain 5 GCSEs, 7% BME community, and it had got some of the worst health statistics in the city, 37% higher generally than the city average. So SRB programme, which ran between 1997 and 2004, was the very first community-led SRB programme in the country. Manor and Castle Development Trust, which I work for now, was set up in 1997 to manage that delivery, and it was a mixture of capital projects and revenue projects. And it was, again, 7 different programme areas, and I've listed them now, I'm not going to go into them. And it was all about tackling the underlying problems, including the wider determinants of health and well-being. And I was lucky, I knew the guy who set up Manor and Castle Development Trust, and I worked for Sheffield Health Authority at the time, and I rang him up and I said, are you interested in a health project as part of the SRB? And he went, yes, how much do you want? So I got 50,000 a year with match from Sheffield Health Authority to set up a community-based project that was all about wider determinants of health, health promotion and public health interventions. So it wasn't about medicine and clinical interventions, it was about the social and economic well-being. So some of the principles that underpinned our work, it had to be community-led, managed and delivered, and it was. It was about building on the assets, which were the people and the buildings that we had and the other local organisations that were already working in that community. So one of the projects, for example, the Manor Community Childcare Centre, started on the Manor Employment Project. So a group of women set up a nursery on the disused site, eventually moved into a purpose-built building. They're still going now, and the woman who set that up 30 odd years ago, Norma, retires today after 30 odd years of running childcare, and she was a local person at the time who set that up. So pretty innovative, pretty inspiring people there. So we didn't call it this then, but actually what we did was asset-based development. It was all about people and place, and it still is. It was all about community engagement, reaching the parts that other organisations can't and don't reach. They're not hard to reach, you just have to have the right methods of doing it. We were a catalyst for change. An example would be over $1 million was invested in the green space. We've got lots of green space. Sue France, who's the Chief Exec of the Green Estate, which is the social enterprise that manages all our green spaces, took me for a walk round, and we've got more green space in the Manor Castle ward than the whole of York as a city has. That's how much green space we've got. Most of it in 1996 was absolutely rubbish. It was wasteland, it was used for burning out cars and all sorts of other unpalatable activities. And now we've got one of the nicest district parks in the city, I think. And I am biased, I know I am. But we've also got lots of really lovely, well looked after pocket parks right in the middle of the manor. And we've got the best heritage site probably in the country, based around the Turret House site. And you've been to Cholera Monument, some of you today. That's in our patch. So you can see the breadth of what we've actually got. And that set up the Green Estate, which is now 2 million turnover. It trades internationally and nationally as well as locally, but all their surplus is reinvested all back in the Manor Castle ward. We've played an enabling role. We've never always done everything, so we've always worked with partners, and we've only plugged the gaps where there's been what I call market failure. So as a trust, we've been embedded in the community now for 23 years. 82% of our staff are local. They've either been born and bred in the Manor Castle ward, left and come back to work. They still live there, or it's people who've come to work for us and then decided to move into area and they live here now, which I think is a real significant indicator of how much change has taken place over the last 23 years. And I mentioned earlier, I think we were born, as an organisation, we were born out of market failure because the statutory sector and the private sector were not interested in that estate for various reasons. So focusing on delivery, I'm not going to go through every single thing of this, but this just gives you an idea of the breadth of what we're actually involved in. So we do a lot of work around health and wellbeing. We've got the community wellbeing programme still, and we're about to move into, I think, our 5th or 7th or 8th year of delivering community wellbeing. Prior to that, we had a healthy living network and we've had a health action area project. So we've got 23 years experience of delivering health and wellbeing interventions, and I've just listed some. Do lots of community development. I've still got a community development worker whose job it is to go out, work with local people to work on issues that matter to them, and a lot of these projects have come out of that. I'll just pick up one. Our bonfire, which is on Manor Park. This year, when we ran it, last year when we ran it, we think we got 6,500 people turn up to it. It's huge. It's the biggest, most stressful thing I do in the whole of my life, but it is such a success and it is worth it because people absolutely love that event that we put on. We do a lot of work supporting people into work, and I had a look at the figures. In the 10 years we've been directly delivering that work, because we've not always done it, we've got over 850 people into work, and a lot of those people have got a lot of barriers that they've had to overcome in order to get into work. Not going to go into any of them all, you can ask me questions later. So some of the principles that underpin how we work: asset-based community development, we build on strengths, we build on people's skills and knowledge and capacity, and we always work from the principle that every single person we meet has got something to contribute. It's just how can we get the best out of them, and that's the very starting point. And a lot of people we work with have had really bad experiences with the system and think they are worthless. And that is the biggest challenge for us, is helping them build their self-esteem and their confidence to go on and do something positive, whether that's go to work, volunteer, go back to education, or basically look after themselves and their own health. I've mentioned community development and principles and practice. We do things with people, we don't do it to them, and everything we do is about tackling inequality. And I will say, actually, over the last couple of years, one of the things that we've started talking about again is the impact that class has on people's ability to achieve. And we've stopped talking about that as a society, and I think we need to start talking about it again, because the vast majority of people we work with are actually working class people, and I think there is a systemic problem that we need to tackle in the same way as we tackle racism and sexism and other isms that are around. The third principle is about person-centred approach. So everything is about that person, helping them remove barriers to engage, developing them progression routes that they want to achieve, and supporting them to reach their destination. And we're there, if things don't go right for them, they can always come back to us. So as an organisation, these are our strategic delivery aims. Building resilient communities, we work with and we support groups. Peer group support is probably one of the most effective things that we do. We recently set up a men's group on Norfolk Park where we also work, and Michael, who's the facilitator, has now got a real problem on his hands because he gets 22 men turning up to that group every single week, and some of them are quite challenging. I don't want to be doing it, I have to say. The other thing that we do is we support people individually, so we've got health trainers still, and we've got advocacy workers, and they do one-to-one work. And we don't have a time limit on it anymore, because most of the people we work with have got, we can't deliver the outcomes in 6 weeks. It can be 6 months, it can be a year. For some people, it can be even longer. And we stay with them until they've achieved what they need to achieve. The other element of what we do is social isolation, which I think is probably one of the biggest public health epidemics that we've had for a long time. Everywhere I go, it's about social isolation, whether that's young people or older people or people who've got children. Social isolation is the thing that keeps coming up when we do our needs assessments. And then finally, we do a lot of work around voice leadership and collaboration, going to meetings, trying to influence policy and practice, and building collaborative relationships to actually deliver better. That's how we see our model. So I think we all know that triangle. It's been around a long time. In terms of now, the challenges are very similar to what they were in 1996. The population's still financially hard-pressed. We've seen growth in the demand for the food bank. Up until last year, we had a 33% increase every year for 5 years. We've now found a plateau, but that's only because we've now got an exit strategy called the Food Club, which is where people pay £2.50, they get access to £15 to £20 worth of fair share food. So basically we're subsidising people's food shops, but that's really helped us keep people away from the food bank for any longer than 4 or 6 weeks, depending on the circumstances. We're still a low-value economy, low-paid part-time jobs, 0-hour contracts, still disproportionate in our area. Worklessness is still an issue, particularly when it's linked to health conditions. Educational attainment's improved, but not fast enough. Poor health still an issue. Housing was demolished and it's only just been replaced. We're going to get 2,000 houses built over the next 10 years. family housing, so that's a lot of new people moving into our patch, and that will have implications for services and for us. Fragmentation of services has been a feature of what we've seen over the last 15 years, and the population change. Our BME population now is 27%, and Sheffield average is 19%. So, and that is a massive change, and that, you know, we are still coming to terms with what we need to do differently in order to meet those needs. So the key issues: persistent poverty, the poverty premium, which forces people into even more poverty, mental health, social isolation, limited job opportunities for people who are less skilled, crime and antisocial behaviour. And actually I talk about organised crime and exploitation of children and young people more than I talk about anything else at the moment. It's really starting to embed itself in our communities, and that to me is the biggest challenge that I've got over the next 5 to 10 years, I think. Not me personally. Hopefully I won't be there, I'll retire soon. And then the last thing is affordable housing, because affordable housing in the government's terms is not actually affordable for the people we work with, and we still know 35-year-olds who are living at home because they can't afford to get on the housing ladder, whether that's social housing or whether that's buy-in. Future, I've just mentioned our strategic objectives, and everything we do is still engaging with the community, maintaining the services that we know the community needs and wants, looking at how we use our resources to meet those needs. We're always trying to do more for less. Nothing we do now is low level. Everybody we meet has got complex needs. Capacity is a big issue. I've just put some of what we deal with, you know, in a ward of nearly 20,000 people or 21,000 people. That's what I've got to actually manage the complex needs that we've got. And then for me, financial sustainability is always a challenge, and improving the quality of what we do, always looking for improvement. We've got a programme of continuous improvement. But actually for me, the most important thing is that we maintain our values and principles in the face of what is actually quite a hostile environment, where we've got competition for resources rather than collaboration. End of.